Good morning, Boker Tov, everybody, and a warm welcome to the second book of the Torah, the book of Shemos. I have a question for you today. We're on page 321 approximately. I have a question for you today. Do you ever feel overwhelmed? Ever feel overwhelmed?
When I wake up in the morning. Of course.
You do feel overwhelmed, but you're retired.
You said do it whenever.
Do you?
Yes.
Now.
Yeah.
Now.
No, now? I'm trying to reach a state of whelmed. Because I'm overwhelmed all the time. So I'm trying to reach whelmed. I don't know what whelmed looks like. But whatever it is, I'm over
When your
it.
kids are all married.
Is whelm a word?
When you don't feel overwhelmed.
So I'm trying to reach whelmed. I don't know what it looks like out there. But, yeah. So I wonder if it's a
The
thing.
importance of what you have in front of you that you have to do will determine to me.
My task is nothing less than changing the world. So I'm overwhelmed.
Change the world.
But seriously, remember when you felt exhausted, depleted? Why were you feeling exhausted and depleted? This is an important question.
Yes.
Stress. Now, what causes you to feel that stress? Let's talk about this. Therapy, right? What causes you to feel that stress?
You have to.
Do you agree that stress is the cause of exhaustion? Exhaustion.
Exhaustion.
Yeah.
You do agree, stress, okay? So why do you feel stress? What causes stress?
You have a desire to accomplish something, and you have a driving need to do that. And
I think that stress is more simply explained as that which is that attempts to achieve that which is beyond your control. Because if you're doing something which is within your control, it's like, okay, I'm going to move this cup from here to there. I could do that. But if I've got to do something which I can't control, I think that's where I become stressed out. Would you agree or not? That's what I'm thinking.
That's why.
Work, you don't have control of everything.
You have more than many things you want to accomplish.
Welcome back.
Good morning.
Rabbi.
Great to see you. Welcome.
Hi.
Hey, good morning.
Another way is what?
More than one thing, many
What?
things that you want to accomplish.
It's good.
They're all there in front of you.
So when you're feeling that you have too much on your plate. Okay. Today we're going to talk about the.
Depends on how you feel. If you have a good night's sleep.
Oh, not rested. If you're not rested.
Yeah, that is.
You could be overwhelmed with joy.
Overcome with joy. That's not a negative emotion. I think that's a very positive
I'm just
emotion.
saying, you could spend one night.
I want to introduce you today.
Not overcome.
Why is the back door open? I want you. Somebody's outside.
So you look at the picture.
I want to introduce you today to
Just say.
the Parsha of the week, which tells us that the Egyptian slavery of our ancestors was not only an enslavement of their bodies, but it was also an enslavement of their souls. It stressed out the Jews to the point that they were overwhelmed, exhausted. In the word of the Torah, they were embittered. Let's take a look at what happened. Embittered. Page 321. Page 321. Here. So the Torah begins, the second book of the Torah, the book of Exodus. Even though the Torah enumerated Jacob's sons by name, when they came into Egypt, it does so again here. When they die, in order to indicate how dear they were to God. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt. Each man and his household came with Jacob. It lists the names of the children of Jacob. Let's go a little further to the bottom of the page, verse 8. At this time, a new king who did not know Joseph arose over Egypt. According to one opinion, it was in fact the new Pharaoh. Others say that this was the same Pharaoh, but that he acted as if he had never heard of Joseph. He was a revisionist because you don't want to thank the Jews for what they did. You don't want to say thank you to the Jews for having saved Egypt from famine. He wanted to enslave the Jews. Nothing's changed, right? Is that what he said? He said to his people, look, the Israelites, are becoming more numerous and stronger than us. People tend to have a selective memory. It's like right now, Jews are being accused of genocide. Mm-hmm. The fact that we didn't start this war, they don't remember that.
Doesn't matter.
They just see that we're attacking.
And that was only a couple of months ago.
Yeah, it's too long, too far away to remember. The fact that we're attacking, Gaza, that is horrific. Why we're doing it? Because they still have our kids and wives and husbands. That's like too far away to remember. It's like we can't remember that far. That's the Pharaoh did over here, right? Okay. He said to his people, look, the people, the Israelites, have become more numerous and stronger than us. Let us deal cleverly with them and their God, who is clearly involved in their unnatural fertility. You know what their unnatural fertility was like? These guys are having sextuplets. They were prolific in their fertility. Lest they increase, and in the event of war, join our enemies, fight us, and go up out of the land, or even worse, take over the country and force us to go up out of the land. Okay? 323. They appointed draft officers over them in order to afflict them with the chores they imposed on them. And thus the Jews built up the existing cities of Pitom and Ramses. Do you think they built the pyramids? Making them fit to serve as storage cities for Pharaoh. You know, Elon Gold is a comedian that we had here. He was great. We had him here a couple years ago. He said, for sure the Jews built the pyramids. Who else would have built the pyramids? See, the first day they told the Jews to build the building. So you know, the one Jew says to his friend, he says, Herman, listen, we don't have to make the second row the same size. We can make it a little bit smaller. You think anybody will notice? Nobody noticed. So he says, Herman, the next way, look at that small.
Before you know it.
I haven't heard that one. That was funny.
He does it so good. He does such a good job. He's like, who else could have built the pyramids? Who else would build a structure like that?
The importance of having a chair.
Sometimes you get a Jewish contractor. It's cutting corners. Nobody's gonna notice.
So the Egyptians are going, does it look like it's getting smaller? He's flawed.
Sun doesn't look right about that building, I'm telling you. Tutankhamun, man. There's something weird with that building.
You know, it would have been easier to make straight walls. Harder to figure it out.
Then they let them build some more.
They're like, make it exactly the same as that one. You know what? It's good for tourism. Keep it up. But the more the Egyptians afflicted them,
If it wasn't circular, you could probably turn it upside down and maybe use it for a cradle.
but the more the Egyptians afflicted them, the more God blessed the Israelites. So they increased and spread. And the Egyptians were both disgusted and vexed over the increase of the Israelites. The first phase of conscripted labor lasted about 30 years, sometime after the year 2332 until 2362. Just to put into perspective, the Jews left Egypt in the year 2448. That's when 2448 since Adam and Eve, since creation. So we left Egypt in 2448. This would be 2362. So you get a little perspective about 100 years earlier, right? Seeing that this degree of slavery did not curb the Israelites' proliferation of fertility, the Egyptians enslaved the Jews, the Israelites, backbreaking, i.e. demoralizing and unusual labor. This is critical. Backbreaking labor.
How would they, but how, you know, they were so strong. They were, how all of a sudden, you know, could they just impose this on the Jews? I don't know how they could do that.
It's a very good question. I'm going to answer you that in a second. They embittered them with hard labor. Well, let me answer you right now. So the way it started off, you know how you cook a frog?
Slowly.
How you cook a frog? I've never tried it, but they say that the way to cook a frog, you never want to throw him into the hot water because he'll jump right out. You put him in cold water where he's comfortable, and then you light it low and slow fire underneath. And then the water heats up a little bit, and he feels warm.
He's taking a bath.
He's taking a bath. And before he knows it, he's toast. Slowly. This is what happens. It's what the Medrash comments. It says, first, it became a patriotic effort. Pharaoh himself came out with a brick mold. Pharaoh himself came out of the brick mold. He's like, okay, we're building Egypt. Everybody. Now, who sees Pharaoh with the brick mold and doesn't come out as well? Everybody who's in the brick mold. So a few days, Pharaoh and they're building the bricks, right? So everybody comes out, and it's a national patriotic effort. Once the Jews were already doing the effort, they took note of what they were capable of doing, of their quotas. And then slowly Pharaoh's like, I'm not feeling so hot today, but you guys carry on the effort. Right. And then slowly it evolved into enslavement. And interesting that Hasidus teaches us that that's what happens with our evil inclination as well. Because what my true message here is that the Egyptian exodus, the Egyptian enslavement and exodus, is not a story of the ancient past alone. It is a modern day story as well. More than anything, it's relevant to our lives today, where we are enslaved to Pharaoh. Who is Pharaoh? Pharaoh is high and mighty. Pharaoh is our ego. Pharaoh is our ego. It's our Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination. and you ask the same question I want you to ask that you asked right now, I want you to ask about your own evil inclination or our evil inclination. How is it that the Jews were so strong that imagine a spectator of the world says, these are the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These are the children of the Hanukkah miracle and the Purim miracle and the 6-Day War and the modern state of Israel. How did they descend to such sin, to such slavery to their ego? How did it happen? So the Talmud tells us that the Yetzer Hara, evil inclination, doesn't come over to you one day and say, hey, why don't you come do idolatry? Because he knows you're not going to listen to idolatry. He does starts off very, very slowly, like you cooked a frog. First, he says, I think you should lose your temper at the guy who took your seat today in shul. Because I see, I'm holy, right? And now your ego's got a little excited, a little noticed, right? Next day, you should lose your temper with your wife. The next day, you should, do some further, abuse of your temper of your ego, until eventually you reach the point where it's my way or the highway, right? And then you reach the point where you say, listen, God, I know that you have your opinion, but I have my opinion. And I'm not interested in yours. I'm going to do it my way.
It's right in the American education system.
What's that?
Go back to the 1950s and see what we were teaching our children. Over all of the decades.
We learned about God, you mean, back then?
No, I'm just about
just
how
about the
things,
teaching,
about how you can change
even secular teaching,
how you can change something like from being an independent Jewish, people in Egypt to being an enslaved people in Egypt. It's just like you said, slowly. We did that with our education system here. I mean, we had people sitting in front of our senators telling them that the eradication of our people was possibly acceptable
in the context.
The context. I mean, you could take care of all the Jews if the right situation arose.
Genocide is okay sometimes.
Right. Would that have been acceptable 30 years ago? No. Would the American public?
By the way, if that was happening to the black community, if there was a call to genocide and they said, actually, it depends on the context, I think that Harvard buildings would be burning now. Right. The Ivy League would be more like the Crisp Toast League.
In Chicago, was one Schmendrick, this drug addict, was killed by the cops. Look, the whole country was on fire.
Yeah.
Well, I was saying we were talking about how the Egyptians enslaved.
Right. See, you watch the evolution, a slow process,
because,
right?
If you go back to 1955 and someone said on Congress and said, yeah, I think an eradication of a people would be okay in contents. I think I
can support a terrorist group that's promoting, rape and torture.
And yet a bunch of people thought that was okay for her to say in this country.
Right. So I think that's the answer to the question. It's a very, very insightful question you ask. How does this happen? And the answer is slowly, because then you tend not to notice that it's not radical. What?
She's still getting a $900,000 a year salary.
Really? So let's take a look at the wording that the Torah uses to describe this incredible process. So I want to challenge you first of all. As we finish the longest narrative in the Torah about Joseph in the past few weeks, we're starting this narrative now of the Exodus and the slavery in Egypt. As you come to shul this Shabbos, as you study the daily Torah portion, I want to encourage you to consider to read this Torah portion in the present tense. Where you read not only a story of ancient people being enslaved to a distant kingdom, but to us, the current Jews, me, the present Jew, being enslaved to my own Pharaoh, my own ego. Let's talk about that. So let's look at the slavery. They embittered their lives with hard labor. That's a very strong term, embittered their lives with hard labor. It's a very strong term. Make them work with mortar and bricks as well as with all kinds of work in the field. All the work they subjected them to was imposed with crushing harshness. The king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives. One of them, Amram's wife, Yocheved, was called Shifra. The other, the 5 or 6 year old daughter, Miriam, was called Pua. I'm not going to get into the midwives. I just wanted to focus on the embitterment of the slavery. So let's talk about this. The Rebbe comments that for a Jew, the primacy, that's a word, right? The primacy of a Jew's life is not his physical life, but his spiritual life. Think about that for a moment. You get to spend 80, 90, 120 years upon this earth versus an infinity of your spiritual life. So which one is more important?
Yeah.
I mean, putting it to that context, right?
Right.
It's like,
That's again.
yeah, I guess the spiritual life is primary. So when we realize that your spiritual life is primary, the difference being, by the way, that your physical life is myopic. Your physical life is the one that you see at short-sightedness, and that's why we make it primary, because change happens slowly, because we notice only what happens in front of our face. And since we're seeing our physical life, that's why we think that's the be-all and end-all of our existence. But when you take a step back and you see the bigger picture, you realize, oh, okay, there's more to life than just my my next 24 hours, right? So since the primacy of a Jewish life is a spiritual being, then when it says in the Torah that they embittered their lives, it means not only that they embittered their physical lives, but it means that they embittered their spiritual existence as well. We understand that they gave them crushing labor, back-breaking physical labor. I mean, Jews building houses, not a thing we're good at, I think. I mean, there are some Jewish contractors, but we're not into that kind of stuff. We're trying not to get our hands dirty, right? But what does it mean that they embittered their spiritual lives? What is the significance of this meaning? Now, obviously, this implies we're taking the story of the Egyptian slavery and Exodus into modern terms right now. That's what we're doing. We're applying the modern story. And don't forget what it says in the Mishnah. In every generation and in every single day, a Jew has to see himself as if he himself personally came out of Egypt. You have to view the story of the Egyptian Exodus as your personal story. And that's why it's the third paragraph of the Shema. It's recited twice daily. Because why do we have to remember the Exodus? I mean, get over it. It happened 3,000 years ago. It's time to move on. Right? Let it go, man. Move on. But no, we don't forget it. Why don't we let go of the Egyptian Exodus? Why do we celebrate it for 8 days a year with OCD fanatical kitchen customs, right? The reason is because it's not a story of the ancient past alone. It's a story of our modern existence right now as well. So as we understand the spiritual persecution of the Jews back then, we'll be able to put it into the context of our current struggles with our own Pharaoh, with our own Egypt right now, our own ego. So the Rebbe explains that back-breaking labor. You know when the door is open? That's weird. Okay. Maybe Elijah came in.
They brought a table.
Oh, that's what happened. So, what does it mean back-breaking labor? Embittered. Avodas parach. The Rebbe explains that back-breaking labor is a work that has no end and has no purpose. It is a work that is limitless. It doesn't end. It leads to no purpose, and it doesn't serve its goal. So, for example, in Jewish law, when it comes to the very badly translated Hebrew slave. We talk about slaves in the Bible, the Hebrew slaves. It's a very, very bad translation. Somebody who like spoke Hebrew but didn't speak English. He was like, he doesn't understand. It's no such thing as a Hebrew slave in Torah. It's called an indentured servant. You know what an indentured servant is? It's an employee that's not allowed to quit, right? Why? Because he stole and he's got to pay off his debt. Right, that's somebody eats from the restaurant and didn't pay, then you put him in the kitchen until he pays off his right. It's an indentured servant. So there's a law of an indentured servant in the Torah that you're not allowed to give him back-breaking labor. What does back-breaking labor mean? It means labor that has no end. You're not allowed to tell him, dig here and put it over there until I come back. That's what you're not allowed to do. Because there's no purpose in digging here and putting it over there. You just keep me busy for no apparent purpose. That is called limitless labor, right? So in the context of how you're supposed to treat your indentured servants, right, we learn what the Egyptians did to the Jews, is that they gave us purposeless, useless labor. For the Medrash comments that the land, the soil of Egypt was very porous, and you couldn't build anything on it. Somehow the Arabs figured out how to make tunnels underneath the land, right? But in Egypt, apparently, it was so shifting that anything they built would just fall down. They built it fell down, right? So this was the back-breaking labor on a physical level that they were given.
Had they built pyramids?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the story was over there, but
When the Sphinx was discovered, they had to take it out.
oh, it was already sank. It would sank in.
But that's,
But that's over years. I'm just saying.
Years
So
later.
that's what they're saying. But it's a
The
analogy.
pyramids have not
So
No, it's
so
an analogy. How he's
so
saying
so what is this back-breaking labor on a spiritual sense? We understand what it means on a physical sense, that they gave them work that had no end. But on a spiritual sense, here's what it means. As long as a Jew is engaged in his financial pursuits with the proper approach, the work is not backbreaking. What that means is the proper approach to financial success is the approach knowing that my success is in the hands of Hashem. I am only doing my effort in order to disguise the blessing of Hashem. We've learned this elsewhere. It's something which I call the doctrine of divine anonymity, that God doesn't want to be obvious in his blessing. He wants to hide so that we can have free choice. So God says, listen, you want to make money, then give me an alibi, give me an excuse, right? Become a lawyer, become a shoe shining guy in the airport, right? Buy some real estate, right? In Florida, if you don't have a job, you become a real estate broker, right? The new thing today is in the frum world, in the religious world, everybody's going into cash advance. Cash advance. I don't know what this business is, but I guess it's like loan sharks or something.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
but it's cash advance. You know, they're lending money basically. It's like the ancient money lenders, right? So you find a job, find a profession which will make it look like the blessing came not from Hashem, but make it look like it came from your effort, and then I'll bless you. That's the doctrine of divine anonymity. This is the Jewish approach to making money. The Jewish approach says, look, I know the money comes from God. I don't sweat the small stuff. And I know that my effort is there just to be able to create an alibi for Hashem's blessing, so I don't take it too seriously. I don't get stressed out by my labor. Give you a personal example of this. So somebody has clients. One of his clients says, I'm pulling the contract. How do you react? I'm canceling the contract. How do you react? One way to react is to say, oh my God, this is terrible. And to come home that day to your wife and kids. And like it's Tisha B'Av, it's the end of the world. Your biggest client said he's pulling the contract, right? That would be the end of the world. You'd be devastated. Like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to replace? Where am I going to get the money from? The accounts receivable, the accounts payable, But the believer comes in and says like this. I know the money doesn't come from my clients. It comes from God. And now that I know that my money comes from God, okay, so right now I had 27 accounts, and these were my alibi. I'll get another one. I just need an alibi. It's not that this guy is the hand that feeds me. He's just the bridge that delivers.
And he's one of them.
He's one of, exactly. It's like I look at my client as the FedEx delivery guy, as opposed to the golden goose laying the golden egg, right? That's the difference, right? So in the approach where you say that you believe that the client is my golden goose, then I get stressed out beyond compare. I get exhausted. I get overwhelmed. I get embittered when he pulls the contract. But when the approach is that it comes from God and that the client is just a bridge, I don't get stressed out. Okay, so you want to go? Go. Have a nice day. I'm sorry to see you go. I wish you would stay. But I understand. This is what happens. This is life. You just don't get stressed out because you keep you're not investing your head in your effort. In the words of King David, he says, when you invest in your work, your hands, the sweat of your hands in your work, then you'll be joyous. But if you invest your head into your work, what happens? Your head and your heart, there's no end. My head and my heart, the head and heart of a Jew is invested in Hashem, in Torah, in prayer, in tzedakah, because that's how I know I'm going to pull the real blessing. My sweat on my hands, I do hands and feet in order to create the alibi for God's blessing. But if I take the other approach and I say, no, the blessing comes from my efforts. It's not from God. It comes from how hard I work. Then I don't have time to go to shul. I don't have time to learn Torah. I've got to be thinking about my business 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Shabbos is out of the question. Kosher is not even an option because I got to do whatever my clients want me to do and go to their restaurants, right? My values are not with God. My allegiance is with my clients. That approach is one which is going to stress you out till no end when you realize that I am the determiner of my success and my failure, and therefore this is backbreaking labor because it's labor with no end. It's something which is actually beyond my control. I don't know how my clients are going to react, right? I don't know. Tomorrow the stock market could go south, the president of America or whatever, the president of my country can make some sort of a policy decision that reverses, the national election could change something, and then my whole business model goes out of the window, right? Right? I do business with Cuba. Next thing I know, there's an embargo, blah blah blah, and then it's all over, right? So you stressed out. But if your allegiance is with Hashem, then there's no stress, right? Hashem created the world in a way that this world is a world of definition, a world of limitation. Everything is limited in this world. There's a limit to our efforts, and there's a limit to our reward. But when the Egyptians enslaved the Jews, they manipulated this particular point. Now, it's difficult to understand it in the story. It's more easy to understand it in the analog, in our current day Egypt. You are a slave. We are a slave in Egypt today. Why? Because we struggle with this exact point.
The Yetzer Hara.
Well, the Yetzer Hara, the ego tells me, you have to make money. You have to be successful. You are responsible for your own success. Work like your life depends on it. Be stressed out like your life depends on it. You should be bitter. They embittered their lives because this is this is the weak. This is the approach to money of the weak of faith. The person lacking in faith. This is how he approaches money in a way which stresses him out to no end, where he's exhausted and he's overwhelmed. But if you come in with the approach of the believer and you say that it's all in the hands of Hashem, I've got to infuse my effort, but that's it. Only as an alibi, then I'm not stressing out about it because I know that I only need to work 6 days a week, not 7. I need to work only X amount of hours of the day, not during davening in the morning, not in the evening. It's okay. Hashem's got this under control, right? The ego is the Pharaoh that's whipping us into submission. And the question is, how do we react? Are we reacting with faith or are we reacting with fear? There's only one entity on this earth that is limitless. You know what that is? Hashem, and by extension, your godly soul, which is a piece of Hashem. So only your godly soul is able to rise ever higher without any limitation. So when it comes to your Torah study, that's what you should do without end. When it comes to your meditation of Hashem, of godliness, that's what you should do without end. When it comes to your growth in your spirituality, that should be without end because that's truly without end as you rise in the ranks of an infinite God. But when you're working within a finite world, it would be absurd for you to place limitless effort into a limited world. It doesn't make any sense. And that is the explanation of the modern day Egypt. This is how we're taking the story of the Egyptian slavery, which again, it seems to our kids and grandkids like we have an obsession with history and it's time to move on. Our kids and grandkids can easily say, that was then. I get it, but that was then. What about now? Imagine if you could share the story of the Exodus with your kids today and say, what are you struggling with to the point of exhaustion? What stresses you out to the point that you're not functional? How about if you had a chiropractic adjustment of your faith to realize that the blessing comes from Hashem? Your effort is only a conduit, not the cause. And therefore, what are you stressing out about? Don't stress out about college. Don't stress out about your job. Don't stress out about your boss. It's okay. If your boss is a jerk, then you'll find another boss. Start your own business. Hashem will bless your hands. You okay with that, Jen?
Become a money lender.
Yeah, become a money lender.
There you go.
So the reason why the Torah tells us that they embittered their lives is because it's important for us to understand that. It's important for us to ask ourselves if we are allowing our lives to be embittered. It's the same question you asked at the beginning, Jan. You asked, how did they allow this to happen? And we must ask the same question to ourselves. How did we allow that to happen to us? How do we allow it to happen that we could become so dependent on ourselves for our success? People often tell me that they're willing to pray to God for other people, but they're not going to pray for themselves.
Really?
A lot of people tell me that. I find it a little odd, I have to
Yeah.
admit. I mean, if you're going to pray to God, you might as well.
Right.
You know? But they say, no. For myself, they say, I take responsibility for my own success. That's what they say.
Wow.
I can't help
You hear
someone
this a
else.
lot.
Yeah. I can help. I can't help someone else. I'm going to pray to God that God should help them. But as for me, I am the master of my own destiny. That is Egyptian slavery. That is a slavery mindset. That is a slave mentality. That is a person that is in need of liberation and spiritual redemption.
Well, don't you think today's society really places that on most people?
Absolutely.
Where it's coming from.
That's why we need a Moses to open our eyes and say, you don't belong here. You don't belong here. You got to get out of this place. You need to come to the promised land. And kicking and screaming, the Jew will say, okay. All right, Moses, as long as you know what you're doing, I'll go with you. So you need a Moses to pick you up. When you're at the bottom of the dungeon, it's hard to see the bigger picture, to see the context.
Well, it took the Jews a little while to actually believe in Moses. That wasn't a quick thing.
They need all those miracles.
Well, that's
Yeah.
why they did
Yeah,
the
you know,
miracles, right?
I think actually Moses was asking God, like, why should they even believe me, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
God could have done it like that with just the last one. He did all those miracles for the Jewish people.
Because the
Jews
purpose,
then.
Marty, was not to take the Jews out of Egypt. That could have taken a moment.
Right.
It was to take Egypt out of the Jews.
Correct.
The word
Right.
Egypt
That's right.
in Hebrew is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim also means boundaries, walls, shackles, limitation, narrow-mindedness. It's one thing to take the Jews out of the narrow straits. It's another thing to take the narrow straits out of the Jews. And that is something that we struggle with to this very day. This is why we're obsessed with the Exodus of Egypt, because we're still working on it.
You don't stop.
Yeah, you see how exciting it is. Yiddishkeit is so exciting, Judaism. As
Not reading as a history book.
it's not exactly. If you're reading it as a history book, Marty, you missed the whole point. Yeah, you missed the whole point.
We've always done that.
But I had a college kid in my office yesterday, and she told me I've been through 13 years of Jewish private school education, and I'm not sure what I'm looking for right now. I said, well, it's time for you to take it to the next level. So you know all the stories, but you understand the stories? You know the laws, but do they talk to you? I set her on a journey of Tanya. And I encouraged her, start the Tanya, take the Tanya challenge. Let's talk about this as you go along the way. And you'll understand the personal depth of the illumination of Chassidus, of the various one-dimensional faith. Take it from one-dimensional, make it alive, right? Anyways, this is the bottom line, guys. We're going through this beautiful narrative of the Exodus from Egypt. Let's try to make it personal. The first step to redemption is to realize that you're in a state of slavery. So to be able to realize that I am struggling with my Pharaoh, identify a Pharaoh as your personal ego, right? Your personal ego. Ask yourself, how much does Pharaoh afflict me and manage my life? Ask yourself, if you are struggling with back-breaking labor, are there parts of your life that you're stressed out about because you can't control them? Because they're out of your reach? Ask yourself that question. And if there's something that's out of your reach, then your ego is misleading you, because Hashem is in control of everything, and you're probably barking up the wrong tree if you're stressed out. If you're feeling overwhelmed, this is how you reach a state of whelmed. Is that a word, by the way, whelmed?
I don't think so.
How could overwhelmed be a word and whelmed not be a word? I mean, that's setting us up for failure.
Check with Rabbi Dovid.
Seriously, that would be setting us up for failure. We have a word for being dysfunctional, but we don't have a word for being functional. This is not okay with You could be exhausted, but how about hosted? Could you be hosted?
Previously hosted.
Well,
Well,
means engulfed, submerged, or buried.
oh, that's not good. Overwhelmed.
Or flow or heap up abundantly. The brook whelmed up from its source. I'm not sure what that means. Can I just be whelmed? Here's the question. In the film comedy, 10 Things I Hate About You, the character Chastity Church asks, I know you can be underwhelmed, okay, and I know you can be overwhelmed, but can you ever just be whelmed?
That's very good.
The answer to Chastity is yes. Contemporary writers sometimes use whelmed to denote a middle stage between underwhelmed and overwhelmed. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
There's one.
Okay, we're working on
You wanna be
it.
whelmed.
We didn't invent this. We're shooting for whelmed.
To be well.
Hey, that's what you got Google for, right?
Okay.
May the
Chastity.
realm be with you.
All right, guys. Something to think about all day. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Don't try. Do.
Fran says, as a special ed teacher, I wasn't sure I can accomplish what I wanted to. Okay, there you go. Whelmed.
Overwhelmed. What was that? Say it again.